violation of state, federal, local laws or policy, but it's only used for the narrow purpose of looking into that concern. So it's not otherwise going to be something that is made public or is otherwise available or is used for any other reasons.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kind of taking on what you just said, and I hear the concern from my other two colleagues, but if there's that literally narrowed usage of that, to me, it kind of protects and makes sure that when and if we ask for that, that we are only looking at specific things within that social media that only apply to what we would be investigating, so that we're not making the effort to do the deep dive into a person's personal life, but we're looking only at the particular issues that have been brought to our attention that has risen to us to even ask for that. I agree. As an employee, I wouldn't want my employer to just be able to just walk up and say, "Hey, Lawrence, I need your username and password for any of your social media things." But I get it sometimes if someone has, or some type of accusation has come up that involves something with any of our students. I think that is a reason to potentially, in a limited scope, research and look at that particular information, not necessarily going beyond that limited scope of what we are trying to see if a staff member has inappropriate contact or communications with a student. That's not my thought, but it is complicated because social media does change so quickly. It makes it, we're always going to be 2 steps behind where those things are happening. And I think this is always going to be something that's going to be coming up and ever evolving of what we're going to have to do with these type of policies.
I'll just add my 2 cents worth. I guess I actually feel comfortable with it as written. I think if we go too far the other direction in prohibiting having a username and password, in some cases it could almost be detrimental to the employee. I think there could be cases where somebody says something, they want a way to show, kind of clear their name. So I guess I feel this is narrow enough that I feel comfortable with it as written.
And I spoke with Mr. Anderson earlier today about his concerns, and I understand where he's coming from, and I think he brings up a lot of really good points. But much like Ms. Liddon, I do feel comfortable with this, given the narrow scope as outlined in lines 16 through 23. Gives me comfort that as a division, we won't be just requesting this without very significant reasonable belief that there is an issue, and that we think that looking at that social media account will help us in the investigation, is not just a fishing expedition. Right. Mr. Castillo.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I think we have a tail, but we don't have a dog here, because we're talking about, first of all, why should it be limited to social media accounts? Why not email as well? And we're not talking about what kind of use and communication we're worried about. I think we would have a much stronger policy for accessing things if we had a stated policy for what was prohibited. And I think, getting back to, you have to understand, social media today is the coin of the realm for communications. We have tools left, right, and sideways for communications at FCCPS. Mm-hmm. I think we would be sitting in a much better place to prevent problems as well as to address problems if we set out very clearly whether and how social media is to be used for communication, because then that would give us a much stronger basis for saying when those rules are broken, how we deal with that. Right now, we're operating in a vacuum, And I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. And the kicker is, of course, we can just ask, and it doesn't have any force behind it. So to me, it's a milquetoast solution to a non-problem, because we haven't really addressed the real problem. But other than that, I think it's great.
Thanks, everybody. I think, I certainly understand that it would be another tool in the quiver and make things, make it possible for, in the circumstances that are narrowly scoped here, to be able to go and see and try to, in some cases, perhaps clear an employee of an accusation. In some cases, it would actually provide really critical information in the other direction. I think it's a balance between privacy and protection of our students. And I think as it's written, it doesn't go far enough for me to be comfortable with the protection of the privacy. And so if there are things we can do that maintain the protection for other employees, for students and staff, but also are providing privacy protections. There's nothing in here that says, right, there's nothing in here that says an employee doesn't have to say yes if asked. And the Virginia Code doesn't say that either. What the Virginia Code says is that the employer is prohibited from taking any effectively retaliatory action against somebody who says no. I don't know if that gets to the point, Mr. Castillo, that you raised earlier about, do we want to tell them that they can say no? But anyway, it's what the Virginia Code says. I think it's one of these things where it says we don't require employees to do this. We aren't prohibited from viewing publicly available information, and I have absolutely no problem with that. If it's public, it's public. That's fine. But I think if it were more the dial were set, you're only allowed to ask for it in the cases that are laid out in 19 through 23, I'd be more comfortable than I currently am. I'm not sure I'm still comfortable enough, but if it said, this is the only circumstance under which we would do that. And then perhaps if the policy were to go forward and if there were a regulation developed to implement it, one of the things is, I suppose, a mitigation is if it said very specifically, who would do the looking? I'm just going to be really blunt. I wouldn't want my supervisor to look at social media stuff because there's things in there that don't necessarily want my supervisor to know about, and they can't unknow it once they've seen it, no matter how careful they are. I mean, that's just humanity, right? It's not that I don't trust my supervisor. I actually do really like the guy. But anyway, the issue is just for me, if there's a way to build in protection that separates the person doing the looking from anywhere in the direct chain, I don't know how to do that. So this is where I get to the point where I would just say I think this needs some more thinking before I'm going to be comfortable with it. But I am listening to everything everybody said, and I've heard it, and I'm definitely taking this one through. But I've been wrestling with this one for several days. So anyway, thank you very much.
Madam Chair, I know she's new, and I don't want to put her on the spot, but Ms. Singley, do you have any thoughts about this? You can say, could I get back to you, but I think you could help us understand some things better with your perspectives. And you should never hesitate to pipe up when you need or want to.
Can I get back to you on that, actually? Sorry.
Well, so what we can do then is we can do the motion. We'll bring this back for second reading. And if anyone is not comfortable with first reading, you can, of course, say no, say nay when we do the motion. Yeah. Or abstain.
Yes, I certainly. We'll also go back and sort of try to muddle through some of the feedback that we've heard tonight. I know that there are some folks that are comfortable the way that it is, and some folks that aren't. And if there is a way to kind of come to a place that serves all of you well, we might try to find that place. I don't know if we're going to be able to, but we'll give it a shot. But going through first reading gives us a chance to at least have it on the docket for second reading next time.
Okay, well, we will go forward with the motion. Would someone please move to approve first reading of the policies discussed? Thanks, Ms. Rosen.
I move that the school board approve first reading the following policies: GBEC, JFCH, KGC, tobacco products and nicotine vapor products, and policy GAD, access to employee social media accounts.
Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Litton. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
And I'll vote nay as well.
Or abstain? All right, and so we'll move on to first reading, but the opposition is noted, and we will be looking into the policy more. Thank you. Next on the agenda, section 8.01, future agenda items. Any future agenda items? Mr. Webb?
Just one, and it may be something for us to discuss at the Thursday, is it Thursday, work session / retreat that we're having, being that it is now after July 1st, and we can officially have a conversation about potential starting school early, and at least have a community conversation about that, of what that could look like and what some of the folks here in town's thoughts are about that before we get too far into it and starting looking at calendars for the next school year and see if this is something that folks are interested in. I know this is something that, I guess 2 years ago was a question at one of the council debates, and that the students were asking about it, and just something I think that we should probably at least have a general conversation about and go and just see where that leads us, so that if we, as a community, are open to that, better sooner than later to do that.
Oh, I was just going to say, I know Dr. Noonan and I have met with the PEAK committee, and they've provided a fair amount of feedback, so I don't know if it would make sense, Dr. Noonan, to just talk high level about some of the feedback that they've come up with and share that with the board.
Well, first of all, thank you for raising that as a topic. We actually have started to map out what the work sessions in the future are going to look like, and we have it slated into a work session already. The August retreat was not necessarily a time that we were going to talk about it, but that's certainly something we can modify and adapt. I did present it, or have had a number of ongoing conversations with the PEAK group around this topic, and my charge to them was to help us think about how do we talk about it in a way that makes sense. And so they've been very helpful in sort of talking through not only how we might be able to talk about it, but also look for some exemplar schedules that are out there that are prior to the pre-Labor Day start. And so they did go out and did some research. And again, this isn't to start the ball rolling towards a pre-Labor Day start. It was to gather information to see if there was a schedule out there that seemed to make sense. And there were a number of threshold measures, if you will, that sort of needed to make sense, needed to be there for it to make sense. So for example, if we did a pre-Labor Day start, they didn't want to go till June 15th. Which is when we end now. So the presumption is if we go earlier, that we would end earlier. One of the things, another sort of threshold measure for them was, did the quarters make sense? And was there a possibility to end the second quarter by winter break? And so they went out and they looked for some schedules that perhaps would be able to end the quarter at winter break. One of the threshold measures, which was not achievable, is to end by Memorial Day. Some school divisions around the country are able to do that, but they start really early in August. We wouldn't be able to start that early. But some of the other things that we're looking at is, what does it mean with respect to the testing schedule? And how does it line up to more closely